Welcome to Built in Public, the podcast where industry leaders pull back the curtain on how they actually built it. The hard calls, the pivots, the moments AI changed everything, and the lessons they wish they'd known sooner. I'm your host, Troy Mann. Each episode, we go deep with founders, operators, and innovators who are growing businesses in a world that's moving faster than ever. No polished narratives, no highlight reels, just real conversations about the journey. Let's build. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Bailey from WCP Building Renewal, a company that spent years helping property managers, strata organizations, and commercial building owners navigate complex restoration and renewal projects. Stephen has a unique perspective because he sits at the intersection of operations, client communication, project management, and business development. This gives him firsthand insight into where construction projects succeed, where they break down, and how the industry is evolving. What I'm especially excited to explore today is how building renewal companies are managing increasing operational complexity, stakeholder coordination, and technology adoption, especially as AI and automation begin reshaping service industries. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Happy to be here.
So why don't you start out and just give the audience an overview of
WCP Building Renewal. We've been in the market now for about 25 years. WCP is an acronym that was for Wolfgang Commercial Painters. They were a commercial painting company for about 20 of those 25 years, and then rebranded to WCP Building Renewal because our services became a lot more holistic, and we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves with just commercial painting, which was in our name. We're servicing primarily British Columbia up in Canada here. We've done some work out of Alberta as well, because some of our great clients have brought us over into that province. We have three major client segments, which would be commercial, so building owners, property managers. We also do probably about 20% of our portfolio is residential, but multi-unit residential, so towers or townhome complexes. And then another client segment would be engineers. And we kind of become that pivot point between envelope engineers and our clients, and helping them to restore and renew and make their buildings and their assets withstand the test of time.
How did you first get into building renewal and the construction?
My background is not construction. I always say to people, I'm pretty useless on the tools, if I'm being honest. So my background is, my path into sort of business development wasn't really a straight line. It's really helped me with prepare for what I do today. But I've been a boxing coach actually for about 20 years. And it hasn't been my primary focus for probably the last 16 or 17 years or so. But the CEO of WCP, he actually came in and trained himself for an amateur boxing match, and I was his coach. As you create a relationship with someone being their coach, and especially in a sport like boxing, where it really strips you down and there's nowhere to hide, you really start to understand people at their core and what their true character is. And I always had a really big respect for Dave because of how he carried himself in the gym and how hard he trained. And especially when he actually did end up getting in the ring of a 3-round fight, he lost the first one. And I remember thinking to myself, well, Dave, we'll see where your heart is now. And he ended up coming back and winning his final 2 rounds. And it was this huge triumphant moment for him, which I was thrilled about. So in my previous role to WCP, I was the head of sales for a marketing company, and Dave and I went to go for lunch, and I was prospecting his business. He was headhunting me. He was obviously the better salesman because he poached me away. And so I've been with WCP now for just under 2.5 years.
As we dive into the day-to-day, why do so many construction projects struggle despite good technical expertise?
Because there's so many stakeholders involved. This is a conversation I have with clients and just people in the industry as a whole. I mean, there's so many moving parts. And I'm also thinking about a bit of a larger scale construction project. But one of the things that we teach, because from a biz dev marketing standpoint for our business, we decided this year, everything that's going outbound, we're going to lead with education, whether that's lunch and learns or webinars that we host, or even recorded interviews with some of our clients. But in all of those, basically what we're trying to do is help people to understand expectation alignment, how they can set themselves up for success, really trying to identify where the major pain points are for our clientele, and then share our experiences, because the CEO, Dave, and our managing partner, Heinrich, they've been in the industry together. It's closing on 50 years. So they've seen everything. So it's extrapolating that knowledge, putting it into a presentation and then sharing that with people. But to answer your question, I would say that it's a misalignment from the beginning. It comes down to the core definition of scope, misaligned expectations, like I said, inadequate planning, communication breakdowns. Another big one would be choosing the wrong team. That's massive. I'm selecting partners solely on price instead of capability, fit, and communication. I mean, that's obviously going to lead to downstream problems for sure. I also think unidentified roles and responsibilities. For example, when ownership of decisions in task is unclear, important items are going to fall through the cracks. The other thing too, about 20% of our portfolio is residential, and this is a huge sticking point when we deal with residential strata, and fair enough because it's owners that live in the building that you're working on. So they're entitled to a lot when you're doing that work for them. But one biggest setback would be unrealistic budgets or schedules, right? If you're disrupting a residential tenant or even a commercial business, if the project is underfunded or the timeline is too aggressive, teams are going to be forced into constant compromise. And those conversations, they chip away, they take time, they cause delays, they cause frustrations. And then what ultimately is going to happen is just low trust among all the stakeholders. So projects with, I would say, adversarial relationships are going to tend to experience a lot more conflict and poorer outcomes.
How much time gets lost chasing updates, approvals, and documentation?
You lead by example for sure. For us, we do our best. It's never going to be perfect, but if you have control of about 80% of the outcome and the 20 is outside of your control what you can control. So I think one of the biggest hidden costs in construction is the amount of time stakeholders spend simply chasing information. Many property managers, consultants, and owners, can easily spend 20 to 30% of their time following up for updates, clarifying responsibilities, or just trying to understand, where things stand. So that's time that could be spent making decisions and moving the project forward when expectations and communication protocols are established early. I think much of that friction disappears. We were presenting at a client not that long ago, and you open it up for questions and then you end up having conversations with them. And this was at a property management group. And one of their property managers said, one of their biggest frustrations is not getting continuous updates from contractors. And our pushback to them was, did you define that in your scope? In your scope of work, did you cite that you need a weekly update? Let's say you set it for every Friday afternoon at 1 p.m. And even if the update is there's no update, at least you're keeping that continuous line of communication open. And if you define that in your scope right out of the gate, then that expectation's been set. So one of two things are going to happen. Then you're going to have a contractor that aligns and sticks to that and will present you with updates that you require. Or B, they're not going to do that. You're going to find out very quickly that A, you're not going to work with this person again, or B, they weren't the right partner from the get-go, and it's going to be a learning experience. And then maybe you have to be chasing that person. But it's a huge frustration. It's industry-wide. It's never perfect. Things change, especially larger projects. The more stakeholders, the more services that are involved, the more complex it's going to become.
Construction tends to be slow to evolve, in my experience. So with what you're seeing, are construction companies actually adopting AI yet? Are they mostly experimenting, or are they still kind of waiting to jump into that ring?
How can you not mention the big bad AI in any conversation these days, right? And it's fair enough. I think I can only speak to us as a company. For example, every single quarter, push our entire internal team to leverage AI as much as they possibly can. So that way, at the end of the quarter, we actually sit down, and one of our quarterly rocks or goals, we operate off EOS, is essentially to sit down and educate the rest of the team on ways that AI had breakthroughs for you, so that way you're becoming more effective in your role. Now, I would say that construction has traditionally been very relationship driven and operationally focused industry. So new technologies often take longer to gain traction, but most companies are understandably focused on delivering projects safely, on time, on budget, which leaves a little room for experiment, or a little room to experiment, I should say. But that said, we're now seeing a real shift with AI. Forward-thinking firms are beginning to recognize that AI just is not a novelty. Way past that point, it's a practical tool that can improve communication, can improve planning, it improves marketing, it improves internal efficiency, which is why we have that mandate to make sure that we're constantly pushing the envelope there. And I mean, again, going back to a recent conversation I had with, because we do quite a lot of presentations. So another one I was at a couple weeks ago, and one of the items I always leave is near the end is let's have a discussion about AI and forget how you're even using it in a professional standpoint. Talk to me how you're using this personally. What are you doing with AI that's helping your day to day? And I'm so fascinated how everyone's approach to AI is a little bit different. For example, a gentleman just the other week was telling me that he and his wife were taking a trip. I think they went to Indonesia, and he plugged in his hotels. He plugged in the dates he was going to be there. He gave a very loose idea of certain things that he wanted to do and interests that him and his wife had. It produced a day by day itinerary for him to go and have this phenomenal trip. And it kind of blew my mind because I wouldn't have used it for that purpose. I use it for other things. Personally, when I'm cooking, I use AI all the time. Hey, these are my ingredients. How can I make a restaurant quality dish? These kinds of things. It's not the only thing I use it for, but just as an example, right? I think what's important is that AI doesn't replace industry expertise or relationships. Our business is still very relationship driven. Construction is still fundamentally a people business, right? But AI acts as a powerful accelerator, and it helps us think more clearly. It allows us to execute faster, and it just delivers greater value to our clients at the end of the day. So from a construction standpoint, I still think we're in the early innings, but the companies that learn to combine deep industry knowledge with tools like AI will have a significant advantage over the course of the next couple of years and over the course of the next decade.
I've never met a business or business owner that didn't want to make more money. And there's two ways to make more money. You can increase your top line or reduce your spending. Where do you feel that emphasis is placed at your company?
That's a good question. Our focus is on both. My mind's going both ways, but if I had to choose one area, I think what we're placing a significant emphasis on just right now would be driving top line growth through better systems and smarter execution. If I had to wrap it up in a bow. On the revenue side of things, we're investing heavily in education-based marketing. We're doing webinars, lunch and learns. We're entrenched with local associations, and that just means a more disciplined business development process, and that helps generate qualified opportunities. It also deepens relationships with key clients. It structures it in a way where we've identified businesses that we can do business with that we're not currently doing business with. We also have identified the businesses that we're heavily entrenched with. Now, that doesn't mean that we're focusing on one more than the other. One is top funnel, one is relationships. So it's making sure that we're nurturing both sides. Basically, if I'm using a metaphor, think about there's an open door, we're getting people in, we close the door behind them, and we keep them happy. But I would also say at the same time, we're using, AI to improve efficiency across marketing and business development. For me personally, tasks that used to take days, like developing presentations or writing campaigns or analyzing accounts, preparing client communications, this can now be tackled and completed in a fraction of the time. We're increasing our capacity without proportionally increasing our overhead. So that means our team can execute at a much higher level while staying focused on what matters the most. And that is building relationships and helping clients make better decisions. So ultimately, the goal is not just to work harder. It's to build systems that allow us to scale intelligently and then create more value for both our clients and for our business.
It's a great way to look at it. When you think about the marketplace, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things going on geopolitically, where do you foresee WCP building renewal in the next 12 months? And what are the challenges that are slowing you guys down or stopping you from getting there?
I was at my son's swim lesson on the weekend, and I bumped into a friend of mine's husband. He was also at a swim lesson. So we ended up chatting. He's the VP of construction at a local company in Vancouver. And it had been a while since we caught up. We talked about what I'm doing. And it's funny because when I say that I'm in construction, people's faces kind of go sour a little bit, as if to say, you must be hurting right now. It's quite the opposite for us, if I'm being transparent. We're having the best year we've ever had. Reason being for that is because when building owners or property groups aren't building, their focus shifts to let's maintain and take care of our current assets before we think about expanding this portfolio at all. So we've actually seen a lot of new development, new construction try and break into our space. They're not structured for it. My CEO was saying that the other day. He's been through this cycle 2 times before. This is the 3rd time he's seen this, where down market development's not happening and new construction breaks into our space and it just doesn't work. So for us, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. We certainly felt the effects like everyone else did, especially in Canada. There was a perfect storm last year in January because the Oval Office in the States had just changed. There was a lot of tariff uncertainty for us. More locally, we had a federal election, so that changed things. Everybody tightened their wallets for about 3 months. So we got through it. And then on the other side of that, we've just been kind of taken off. So that's more speaking about us. But I think when you look at a broader marketplace today, there's no question about the uncertainty. I have conversations about it all the time, both professionally and personally, right? So you mentioned, geopolitical tensions. I mentioned tariff concerns. There is inflationary pressures, a more cautious economic environment now. I think we're all still in the tailwind a bit of COVID. I don't think we've fully come out the other side of that quite yet. I think people are still a little nervous about that, but I don't really want to talk about that. But in Canada, the construction industry remains active. It does. But I would say that owners are scrutinizing budgets a lot more carefully and decision-making cycles are taking longer in some cases. Construction costs continue to rise modestly, while then there's trade tensions and tariffs and adding pressures to material-intensive projects. But to answer your question about WCP, that said, I'm very optimistic about where we're headed over the course of the next 12 months. I think our industry is fundamentally driven by trust and relationships. Some of those relationships we've had with clients our entire existence over the course of the 5 years. Those are areas where we believe we have a real advantage. We've invested heavily in educational marketing, client events, so we're client facing as much as we can. Strategic account development. We're not waiting for the market to improve. We're building systems that allow to grow kind of regardless of market conditions.
Very good. Hey, Stephen, thanks for sitting in and giving us the all access tour into WCP Building Renewal. Thanks to those that are watching or listening. Until next time, I'm Troy Mann with Ascent Integration Partners. Remember, the pace of change in the market is getting faster every day. Adapting to change is not a requirement, but neither is survival. Rise above with Ascend. Take care.